Welcome to this explainer, where we're going to unpack a brilliant and frankly completely chilling production blueprint. This framework is specifically designed to manufacture psychological dread using a mix of AI tools and clever sensory manipulation. Basically, we're looking at the exact step-by-step formula for creating a viral, high-retention piece called The Day Earth Went Silent for 60 Seconds. And look, this isn't just a basic software tutorial. It's actually a masterclass in how to hijack human attention and emotion using a highly structured cinematic thought experiment.
Right off the bat, the blueprint drops us straight into the deep end with this dark thought experiment. It sets a tone that honestly hooks you instantly. I mean, just think about it for a second. Picture your chaotic morning commute or sitting in a packed coffee shop, and then suddenly, it's entirely stripped of noise. We aren't talking about a monster movie or a massive explosion here. It's just the sudden, totally inexplicable absence of something we literally take for granted every single day. The blueprint uses this as the opening hook, and it perfectly sets the stage for a really deep psychological journey.
All right, let's jump into Section 1, the silent thought experiment, defining the tone and atmosphere.
So, to make a wild, impossible concept like global silence actually work on screen, your visual demands have to be incredibly precise. The blueprint lays out this very specific, dark aesthetic. Think Hollywood disaster documentary meets psychological thriller. It calls for crisp 4K resolution at a cinematic 24 frames per second, a dark blue color tint, high contrast, and just a little bit of film grain to really sell that moody atmosphere. You've got to establish this vibe from the very first frame. By using these realistic, massive global-scale visuals, you make an impossible scenario feel completely grounded. It just feels undeniably real.
Moving on to Section 2, Anatomy of 7 Scenes, the narrative engine.
The real genius of this blueprint is how meticulously it structures the panic. Just look at how the timeline shifts the focus here. It starts at the 12-second mark with the world stops phase, so you're envisioning something like a crowded Tokyo crossing or a New York traffic jam that is just suddenly frozen in sheer confusion. But then it rapidly narrows down. By 28 seconds, we're thrust into silent panic. This is where you get those intimate, emotional close-ups. Imagine a mother screaming for her child in total silence, or people frantically smacking their ears. And by the 1-minute mark, fear spreads into dark subway stations with this gritty, handheld camera psychological horror vibe. It's a masterstroke, transitioning from huge global confusion all the way down to deeply personal horror.
And that pacing leads us directly into the terrifying emotional climax in Scene 5. The blueprint describes this slow, creeping camera zoom on a terrified man touching his chest. He suddenly realizes he can't even hear his own heartbeat. The voiceover drops this absolutely devastating line, completely flipping the script. Suddenly, the horror isn't about the environment being quiet anymore. It becomes this visceral, internal nightmare.
Okay, Section 3, Sculpting Silence and Sound, Sensory Design.
It's kind of funny, right? To craft a compelling viral thriller about absolute silence, you actually have to rely heavily on masterful sound design. Here's a crazy fun fact. In real life, if you sit in an anechoic chamber, a room of absolute silence, your brain will actually start hallucinating sounds just to fill the void. This blueprint completely weaponizes that exact discomfort. You can't just hit the mute button on the video and call it a day. The strategy is to build up this incredibly heavy, deep bass drone and then aggressively cut to total nothingness. That sudden drop is what absolutely maximizes the psychological discomfort. You completely avoid fast music, happy tones, or loud percussion. Instead, you're using sound to make the eventual silence feel so much heavier.
And, even the narrator's voice becomes a tool for suspense here. The blueprint is super explicit about this. The voice style needs to be deep, calm, and just slightly dramatic, kind of like what you'd hear in a high-end documentary. But the real secret sauce? It's the pacing. You need this slow delivery with really strong, heavy pauses. You literally have to force the audience to sit in the absence of sound, giving them time to truly feel the weight of these terrifying concepts.
Of course, all this incredible atmosphere doesn't mean a thing if people just scroll past the video. So, to lock in high retention, the blueprint actually prescribes a strict, mathematically driven editing rhythm. Those first 30 seconds are absolutely critical. You're using fast cuts, visual mystery, and rapid-fire questions to hook them. During that silent panic scene we talked about, it specifically calls for fast cuts every 2 seconds. And after the initial hook, the golden rule kicks in. Change the visual angle, add a slow zoom, flash some text, or drop the sound every 5 to 8 seconds. It's a highly calculated formula, so the audience literally never gets a chance to look away.
Which brings us to Section 4, the AI Creator Toolkit, Generating the Fear.
To actually bring this complex cinematic vision to life and to do it quickly, you need to deploy a very specific stack of AI tools. You aren't just using one generator for the whole shebang, you're combining them based on what they do best. For example, you'd use Kling AI when you really need those hyper-realistic, terrified facial expressions, like the guy searching for his heartbeat. But then you'd switch over to Runway or Luma AI to grab those sweeping cinematic camera shots of the massive, dead silent cities. By weaving all these specialized tools together, you can build a totally seamless nightmare.
So, jumping to the end. After scene 6, where all the sound violently crashes back in with roaring cars, screaming sirens, and barking dogs, the blueprint dictates this sudden, jarring shift for scene 7. The final shot is just a lonely person standing in a massive, dark city at night. And the voiceover delivers one last chilling thought about our relationship with noise, beautifully wrapping up the whole thought experiment before we finally fade to black.
And right as that screen goes black, the blueprint instructs you to drop the ultimate viral hook. Would you survive? It's brilliant, because it forces us to reflect on our own absolute reliance on this noisy, chaotic world we live in. So I'll leave you with this. If the world went completely, terrifyingly mute right now, how long would it take for the silence to break you?